Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jane and today I'm going to be talking about pockets. Now the reason that I've chosen this subject is that over the past 2 or 3 years I have seen lots of articles or social media posts that have proclaimed having pockets in your clothes as a woman is a great feminist statement, or that patriarchy have stolen our pockets, as though the acquiring of pockets is something that we have been trying to do for centuries, and here we are, in 2026 we have our pockets, and lots of clothing brands really highlight the having of pockets for this. Lots of listings on eBay and Vinted goods have pockets. But the thing is that this doesn't really ring true with me, because since I was a teenager, I have collected vintage costume. Originally, it was to wear, and then more recently, it's been as more of a study kind of collection. And things have come and gone from my collection. But in all that time, the vast majority of the women's clothes that I have had pockets. And certainly if you take out the evening clothes, I would say 95% of things from 1830 to 1950 had pockets. So there's something going on here, and that's what I'm wanting to look at. And I thought the best way to do it is really, we'll look at the history, we'll look at what's happening, but also to keep in our minds what it is that the women that we're thinking about would have wanted to carry. So I thought the best place to start would be with my own wardrobe. So that's where we're going to go now. So this is my wardrobe, and as you can see, I am not a minimalist person. I love colour and prints and vibrancy and putting things all together. And I have put together this wardrobe of clothes over the past 4 years, buying all second hand. It's mainly from Vinted, some pieces from eBay, and almost everything here is by the British firm Toast, which is an expensive brand to buy new, but lots of people seem to buy the dresses particularly, wear them to a wedding once and then sell them on eBay at a very low price. So this is where I have acquired everything. But what I'm wanting to talk about today is really how all of these dresses, because I only wear dresses. I don't wear skirts. I don't wear trousers. All of these dresses have kind of like a certain area of my life that they fit into. And the pocketing situation is tied up with that. So if I start here, right at the front, these are my gardening outfit. And you can see that these two, they have enormous pockets, almost like kangaroo kind of size pocket. And they can fit in all of the kinds of things that you need when you're gardening, like string and labels and secateurs, things that you could keep in a trug on the path, but are much more useful if they are readily accessible, right? So they've got big pockets at the front. And then we have all of these dresses, and this is pretty much my uniform. This is what you will have seen me when I do YouTube videos. It's what I wear every day. It is like kind of a tea dress, drapey thing, not tight fitted, but with a waist and then with big pockets. And what I tend to keep in the pockets here, I must say, is usually my phone, which I'll come back to. These are all really two different dresses, just in lots of different fabrics. And I love them. But here at the back, are two dresses without pockets. Now, they've not been quarantined at the back because they're pocketless, but rather because they are evening dresses. So I've got my gardening stuff, I've got my everyday, and then I've got special occasion dresses. Now, this dress is just gorgeous. Oh, I looked for this dress for ages and ages before it came up on Vinted. And it is a silk dress. It's vaguely 1930s, 1940s in style, which is an era I love. Look, if you see the tops of the shoulders here, they are sheared, gathered in very much the same way that the cardigans that I knit are. It's a 1947 pattern. So it's, it goes in with this vintage thing where people have waists and hips, which suits me. And it is a lovely, slinky dress. I just feel really glamorous in it. It's got a zip down the side, and quite frankly, there is no space for pockets. So it is an evening dress. It's my Christmas Day dress. It's that kind of thing. No space for pockets. I don't care. It's a beautiful dress. And then here at the end, not by Toast, but by Eileen Fisher, is the little black dress that we are told should be in everybody's wardrobe, and it is really, really useful dress. It is wool jersey. And again, it came from Vinted. And it is just a beautifully cut dress. It's a sexy dress. It is absolutely wonderful. It is just, a tie round, but a decent tie so that you're not forever worrying that it's going to fall off. But there is nowhere for pockets. So I have my two evening dresses that do not have pockets. And I was thinking about that for this, and I realised that actually I find it very, very freeing to, when I go out for a meal or dancing or to this theatre, where I would be wearing one of these dresses, or to friends for a fancy meal, that I don't have a whole load of stuff with me, particularly given that the thing that I carry around most is my phone. It kind of gives me the chance to be off duty, to maybe have all my stuff in a bag, a clutch bag, whatever, but tucked under a seat, or to persuade somebody else that they should be carrying all of the stuff for me and I could just leave my phone at home. So there we are. Gardening, massive pockets, everyday, good side seam pockets, but realistically I'm putting my phone in them, maybe a handkerchief, something to wipe my glasses. And then I have my evening things with no pockets at all. So now I want to take you to see a historical dress that I have, to look at the pockets there. Now I am down in the studio with one of the dresses that I have in my study collection. Now this is a beautiful, I think, 19th century dress. You can see it is this gorgeous grosgrain silk. And then it has flounces and flounces of lace. And there's like an underfrill of lace. It's absolutely beautiful. And then to go with it, there would have been an option of two different bodices. There is this one here, which you can see, and this is, it has this velvet, very sort of like fur-like velvet in some ways. And then the back was all little hooks and eyes here, and the interior is all boned. And that would have been one of the looks that you could get from your dress. And then the other top goes with all of that lace. All right, so it matches the lace. And this one would have been laced up at the back. And you can see here on the waistband, underneath there, it says that it was made in Ulverston, which is in the Lake District, the north of England. Right. But for what we are wanting to look at here, The most important thing is the side seam here. So this is the waist, and then here in the side seam you have a pocket very similar to the pocket that I have on this dress. And in fact, it's actually bigger. The pocket bag, when you look inside, look at how big that is, right? And it is reinforced, right? So you could put really heavy thing. You could carry a book in that. So there we are, in the 19th century, which I think, is pretty much one of the most patriarchal societies. An evening dress, certainly in one of its variations, you have pockets, so you could take your sewing, you could take your pamphlets, you could keep letters and notebooks and something that you're reading all in your pockets. And this is what I have found in really all, vast majority of the dresses that I have had in my collection. That certainly up until the 1950s, they all had pockets. So the question is, what happened after that? So what do we know about pockets? Well, we know that from medieval time up until the mid-19th century, women wore tie-on pockets. Now these were, in the large part, plain gathered pockets on ties. So if you think a woman would have on maybe some bloomers that were on a drawstring around her waist, a petticoat that was on a drawstring around her waist, and then these pockets that were a little bit like saddlebags would also go around her waist and have some of that weight taken by the hips. They would be accessible via a seam slit in the overdress, so you could put your hand into the side. And these pockets, these hidden pockets, were really, really important, because if you think about it, women had very little privacy. People had very little privacy. You wouldn't be sleeping in a room on your own. You wouldn't have places to lock up all of your important possessions. So the most secure place that you could have things that were important, irreplaceable, useful, was on your person. You could keep them in these pockets, and then at night you could untie the pocket and put it under your pillow, so that all of the time you knew where it was. Now, we don't actually know an awful lot about what these pockets looked like, because they were worn out. They were not regarded as valuable things themselves. So after they'd been patched a number of times, they would be put into a rag bag and replaced. So we don't really have a lot of physical evidence for them. But what we do have is the evidence of court reports when they had been stolen. And that shows that there was a place for keeping personal jewellery, something that had been maybe handed down in the family, letters of reference, love letters, talismans, special herbs or ointments, all of this kind of thing, your savings would go into your pockets. And many women also had a very similar pocket that would be tied on the top of their skirt, but possibly underneath an apron. And this was where you needed access quickly and repeatedly to things in your pocket. You wouldn't want to put that much strain on the side seam of your skirt. It would have to be quick. So if you were dealing in money, so for example, if a woman was a basket, somebody who took baskets of things from one part of London to another, she would maybe have a pocket so that she could deal with change and so on. A wine cellar, the same. You just have it under your apron. And there was a great problem with petty theft from these pockets. Pickpockets were the people who were stealing from that kind of pocket, not your what we think of as a modern day pocket. So in the 18th century, so the 1700s, pockets for well-to-do, for gentry, for women who now had more leisure, became sort of items to be decorated. And this is most of the items that are in museum collections, because they were done as beautiful embroideries. Even though they were out of sight, they were incredibly beautifully decorated. The reason for this is that there was a fashion right the way through the 18th and 19th centuries of cementing female friendships through gifts of embroidered things. And this is where you get lots and lots of pin cushions and little book covers for Bibles. It's something that trickled down from aristocratic favour seeking. You had always got it with monarchs and so on. So Mary Queen of Scots embroidered a lot of things for her cousin Elizabeth I, hope of currying favour kind of thing. But then it went down the income brackets and it became a really important swapping of things. And a pocket was a really useful thing to embroider if you're wanting it to be an intimate gift to a friend. You know, you have a good space to embroider on, and then they're going to be wearing it underneath their skirts in a really kind of like an intimate way. I think this is all part of it. But these pockets, some of which were used, some of which were clearly not used, are the ones that have ended up in museum collections. The V&A have a wonderful collection of these, and they've done a lot of work, and on their site you can get the pattern to make your own 18th century pocket. But then fashions changed, and although working women right through the 19th century, early 19th century, continued to wear their fashions from the previous century and their pockets, high society and the fashionable woman about town changed her dress. It became empire line. If you think about or those sort of Napoleonic dresses, Emma Hamilton, you know, this idea of the diaphanous dress that fell from just under your bust. Now, there was nowhere to hide your pockets underneath that. It would look ridiculous. So instead, what happened was that pockets came outside. Pockets became what was called a reticule, or an indispensable, basically a little gathered top bag that hung from your wrist. So this was like a slight shrinking of the pocket and a hanging from the wrist rather than from the belt. But I think if you look at them, they're still pretty much the same. But then as soon as you go back to full skirts, you get your side pockets. And it's only when you have very tight clothes at the end of the century, sort of 1890s, that pockets change from being these really big, can take anything kinds of arrangements. I mean, there are descriptions of people having chickens in them and things. You know, they were big, useful, practical. What do women need to have with them to get through their day? That, in fashionable society only, became a whole load of individualised pockets. So there would be a pocket for your parasol that went on your dress. It was like a long V thing that went on the back of your dress, and you could put your parasol in that. There was another for your visiting cards. All of these really individualised pockets all over these women whose outfits really looked a little bit like they were walking furniture, because they were so tight and stiff and formal. And then, you know, you come into 1910, 1920s, masses of pockets. You know, Chanel had great pockets. Paul Poiret had great pockets. They went down into society. And this is what I found from all of the clothes that I have had through my hands up until the 1950s, because I only collected up to the 1950s things, all had brilliant pockets. So what happened? Now, I think there are actually two things that happened. I think that in the the 1970s, there was a cult of thinness in women's fashion that kind of stayed. And there was this idea that if you didn't have pockets on your side seams, your skirts would be tighter. Your silhouette would be smaller. And even, 1980s, I remember in a sewing class, everybody being told of the skirt pattern that we were making, which was not at all a fashionable skirt. It was kind of like a waistband and a gathered skirt, but that we should miss the pockets out because then that would be more flattering. And I think that idea went, and I know that, we were in the age of shrinking your jeans by wearing them in the bath. That suggests that pockets were not as important as having this kind of skin tight effect. And then I think once that started to fade, this sort of fat phobia started to change, we moved into fast fashion. And changing our demands on clothes from it being something that you would buy very sparingly and expect to last a long time to something that you could buy really cheaply and just keep getting new things. That was a sort of a societal decision. We vote with our money, and that has consequences. And the consequences are that there is this ramping up of the need to have things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and faster and faster and faster. And you go from having 2 sort of new fashion seasons to 4, then to 8, and then to it being every week. It may be more than every week now. But one of the consequences of that is that every single bit of cutting, sewing, the material is scrutinized to shave off points of pennies, to get it as cheap as possible, to get it made as quickly as possible. So quality of fabrics goes down, buttons go down in quality, there are, no decent hems, you can't let anything down, you can't change your side seams for altering shapes, there's nothing like that. And one of the things that went was pockets as a consequence of fast fashion. And it wasn't until the 2010s that you start to get this clamour for pockets. You start to get people campaigning, going, where have our pockets gone? Why do we no longer have pockets? And there is a feeling that they have been stolen, because we don't have them. But men who typically have not participated in that fast fashion to the same extent as women, and who spend more per item of clothing but buy fewer things, it's statistics, have retained their pockets. And I think that what brought on this realization was that we had a changing relationship with our phones. Our phones became bigger, and they also were something that were involved in so many parts of our life. We take our photos, we answer our emails, we listen to audiobooks and music, and they are something that you want to have about. And if you don't have a pocket, where do you put your phone? We've had all sorts of kind of inventions like lanyards and what we call it, like a shoulder strap for your phone and so on. But actually, the easiest thing is just to slip it in your pocket. Easy to take out, doesn't bang into things. So that is where we are. And I absolutely agree with the idea that we all need pockets in the dresses that need pockets, and that we should make that very clear to the people who are making our dresses. Because that relates back to all of these women back through the centuries who, when they needed to carry something, they made a pocket. They strapped it on. They made it part of their normal life, and they got on with living their lives because they had their pockets. And that is how we should treat it, that we want our pockets. We say we want pockets. We will only buy day dresses with pockets. And so, because the opposite of that, the feeling that there is a conspiracy to rob us of our pockets, that makes women victims. That makes us lose our agency. Having pockets is very nice. We have our spending power. We should definitely buy pockets. But it isn't the ultimate in feminist action. There are many, many more things that we can do. And part of that is spending our money, of course, where we want to spend our money and where it can make a difference. Eschewing fast fashion, keeping things for longer, mending them, getting together in community, teaching people to make things, teaching ourselves to make things, carrying our pamphlets in our pockets. So, until next Friday, I'd love to know what you have in your pockets. Bye-bye.